All right, we are live for the first time since Brian graduated Binghamton,
Yeah,
which was in
2019.
2019. So it's been 3 years. I checked my watch, but the year isn't actually on it. So that's funny. But we're back. We're back. It's me, Ben. Brian's over here. We used to be Sports Report, but now we are Heads Up, the Heads Up podcast, where we're just going to be talking about sports like we did in the olden days, but this time we're independent. We are, I guess you could say, like essentially unregulated, kind of doing our own thing, longer shows. I'm really excited. Brian, do you have anything to say about kind of the Heads Up podcast direction for us?
Yeah, I'm super excited to see where this goes. It's one of those things where as it goes on, we'll get more of an identity and figure out what we'll do from week to week. But it's just great to be able to just talk sports again. Something that I missed over the past couple of years, not being able to do, on a podcast. We'll text each other about sports every now and again, but you know, I thought, we need to get back into doing these podcasts or radio shows, whatever we were doing, because it was just so much fun. And, it's not about getting big on this podcast or anything like that, just about having fun and talking with your friends.
Yeah, and I don't know if you feel this way. Me and Brian are both grad students. Brian's in med school. I'm in my own psychology program. I feel like they don't want you to have free time. Like I don't know if I'm sure you feel this way, but there are so many responsibilities that add up that make it harder to like pursue your passions because you just can't afford to. So Brian hit me up about getting back on our feet and doing this, and I'm just so excited because I had a lot of fun doing the show with you. Love talking about sports. Love talking about sports with you. So it's cool that even when things feel like they're super busy, we can still do this.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of those great stress reliefs that we could have, and, get a little bit of escape. And then, that makes you work harder once you can work, because, you're relieving some of the stress right now. So it's great.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's exciting stuff. And definitely going to be needed on my end. I'm sure for your end too. So, first we said that we would do kind of some introduction or reintroduction if you listen to us back at Binghamton. So, I don't know how you want to format kind of like the introduction that we'll be giving to the people, but I'll follow your lead and yeah, we'll see what you do.
Yeah, yeah. So I graduated Binghamton 2019. Ben graduated the year after me. Grew up in Staten Island, New York, and from there, grew up a New York sports fan. So grew up in a lifetime of misery in terms of sports, with the Mets, the Jets, Knicks, and then the Devils for hockey. So those are my biases. Whenever you hear me make some takes, you'll know where I'm coming from with some of these. Um, but yeah, so that's me and all my sports fandom.
As Brian said, I graduated the year after him, so class of 2020. Although I grew up in New York, I don't care. I'm not really a New York sports fan because that's not how my family necessarily is. So I've kind of evaded the awfulness of being a New York sports fan over the last decade or so, kind of willingly. So I'm going to sound like a big bandwagoner. I promise I'm not, but I'm a Steelers fan, Celtics fan, uh, Yankees fan, and Islanders fan. And that's where I'm coming from. So good stuff. Me and Brian aren't the same fans of any team. So maybe we'll have some interesting debates if our teams are ever good at the same time. Which
Doubtful.
not yeah. You said if I said it, I wouldn't have sounded that nice, but yeah, probably not going to happen anytime soon. Um, so yeah, that's our introductions. We will kind of get a mailbag going back like we used to have too. But we got to get the wheels turning on that. And when that does, we will announce it at the beginning of the next recording.
For
So,
sure. And sorry to cut you off there, but we're also thinking of making a Twitter as well, so we can make some polls for once we start getting some takes out of, who's the better take, mine or Ben's, or things of that sort. So you could follow along with us, and hopefully we'll get a good interaction.
in the nature of sports, some little competitions between the two of us co-hosts up in here. So yeah, then and as new things, new developments pop up, we will elucidate you to those as well. So do you want to go? We'll start off with some news. You think we're ready to kind of go over some headlines real quick?
I think so.
Okay, so in the baseball department, this is over the course of the past week, just some standout headlines that we've gathered for the people. First of all, the Mets called up their highly touted prospect, Brett Baty, who is from Binghamton, or at least he played minors in Binghamton, right? His first at bat was a 2-run home run, which is always narratively it's awesome, but hopefully is a sign for things to come. No denying that Baty's debut in the majors is one to remember. But Brian, as a Mets fan, how has it been since that 2-run home run debut at bat? And what are your expectations or hopes for Baty now that he's out there?
Yeah, it's been exciting watching him getting some production at third base, which has been really tough since David Wright was on the team. We had got Eduardo Escobar this year, who's been good in little bouts, but not consistently good with the bat, and he's been hurt as of late. So what you're getting with Brett Baty is a real hitter. You see the way that he's played at the plate. His at bats, he's productive. He will take pitches. What I like so far is that he'll sit back on off-speed pitches, which I feel like with a lot of young players, they get a little too excited and kind of don't have the best of timing. But with him, that timing is there, and he's been productive already. The only thing with him is his fielding isn't great. That's going to take a lot more time to develop, and it's already been showing that he isn't the best fielder. But with time, some of the best fielders really weren't that great to start their career. So we'll see.
Do you know how old he is?
I think he's 22.
Oh, so he's a really young player. It's not like he's been
Yeah.
kind of sitting in the farm for a while. So that's interesting to hear that already his batting instincts appear to be like above what you would expect given the learning curve of transitioning to the majors. How common do you think like poor fielding is or subpar fielding is for a player that's just entering the majors?
I feel like it's fairly common, but I mean, I feel like a lot of times in the minors, you'll see a player who's really good at fielding or really good at batting, and that's kind of how they get their call up, because they have that strength in one department, and hopefully the other side develops. But you just don't know if it will develop. So, but with him being so young, I feel like he's got a good chance. So, time will tell.
So for you, the fielding's not so much a red flag as it is like this is just a part of his profile right now because he's young.
Correct. And also with the DH coming to the NL, I think if it comes down to it, he could always move to the DH role if his fielding is that bad. With Pete Alonso at first, it's good to have him as a DH role, but he's serviceable at first base. So I wouldn't mind him staying there on the field for the long term. And yeah, I mean, with that, like if he moves to DH, I think we'll still have room to do well. We just need to get another third baseman then, if that's the case.
Yeah, if he's around for the long haul, then you guys have a lot of time to figure that out. So that's good, encouraging news for the Mets, who we will likely be talking about later in the show, if not plenty for the next several weeks. The Braves signed Michael Harris to an 8-year, $72 million contract extension. My understanding is that he's also a pretty young player, right?
Yeah, I think this is, I want to say, his first year in the league. If tell me later in the show or in the comments or anything of that sort. But it's just, he's had great production early on, and it's just insane how the Braves can just get hometown discounts on every single player that they sign. And I feel like they're getting steals of deals, every single time out there. And I don't know what they have over these players, but they're getting great value out of their contracts.
It's wild that they can come off such a recent World Series victory and kind of continue to make these moves where they're just getting young players at massive values because of that that home discount. So good for the Braves, bad for the Mets. We'll see what happens. I mean, as of now, and my lack of baseball knowledge is showing, so I'm kind of deferring to you here, but it does seem like the Braves and the Mets are in a bit of a battle for the NL East, right?
Absolutely. I mean, for a while, it was just the Mets division on their own, but the Braves just can't stop like winning. It's just today, I think was the first time they've lost in a little bit. They finally lost to the Astros, but they took 2 out of 3 against the Astros, who are a great team that really look unstoppable. And the only time that the Braves lose is luckily for us to the Mets. So it gives us a little more room in the division. I think we're down to 3 games up in the division, and it's getting a little too close for comfort. But the Mets schedule after this next week gets a little bit easier, and the Braves gets a lot harder. So we'll see what happens.
At least the Mets get kind of the good end of that bargain. We'll see if the Braves can keep up as things continue to play out. Sticking with the Braves, Marcell Ozuna arrested again 15 months after a domestic violence charge, this time for a DUI. I'm assuming that the Braves are just kind of hanging tight, waiting for that contract to run out. I doubt once he gets off that, they're going to want to re-sign him with all the trouble he appears to be getting in, combined with what appears to have been really poor play from him recently, if not the whole season. So do you have any comments on that? Do you have any more knowledge on any of the situations with him, or kind of like what his outlook is with the Braves for the rest of the season?
Right. Yeah. And he's been struggling before this on the field. And that's why, Michael Harris has been taking over more in the outfield and getting more playing time and, really thriving. But I mean, this is bad for the Braves, and it's even worse, publicly, considering that they're playing him today. They batted him 8th today, a day or 2 after they found out about the DUI. I don't know. It's one of those things where if I'm like a team discipline guy, I wouldn't want him out there right away. It doesn't, send a good signal to the dugout of how you should perform off the field. But, you got to get players on the field. You got to give guys rest. So you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, it's the cold hard truth that at the end of the day, teams will always put production first. And I think it's very rare that a team will willingly sit a guy out because of off the field issues, unless it's like a league mandated suspension or something. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. Oh yeah. I bet the Padres wish that they could continue to roll him out. Yeah, that's crazy.
His contract now is kind of looking like, it's like similar almost to the Kyler Murray situation where, you can't the field really to what he's supposed to do, considering he got hurt at the beginning of the year, riding motorcycles. Now he's been taking steroids and is really not owning up to it the way he should. I don't know if you saw that he was saying that he was taking medication for ringworm or something of that sort. But it's a medication that sounds similar, but it's not the same medication. He's taking steroids, old steroids for that matter of fact. And he's trying to like pin it off as like he's being, unfairly, suspended and things of that sort, instead of just owning up to it. And it's just not looking like a good contract now.
Wow. I didn't know like the narrative of his contract had flipped so drastically. I didn't know he was trying to play it off like it was a medication for ringworm. Is that a thing?
Bad. Like there's a medication that sounds similar, but it's not the same medication. And like, there's been comments from people in the dugout, other players, the manager, GM, like all saying how disappointed they are in him. And he's really not flipping the narrative at all. And it's starting to get a little bit ugly there PR wise. So we'll see when he gets healthy and gets back from suspension if he'll still perform. But if he doesn't, this is going to be a really bad contract.
Wow. Like he knows people could just Google what he says, right? Like, does he think he's fooling people?
That's where I don't get it at all. It's like, it was the quickest attempt. Like, I don't know what his social media team was thinking, or like his, like his agent, like, I don't understand what their process was with thinking they'd get away with that. It just doesn't make any sense.
That's wild. Well, steroids are bad. Hopefully they find their way out of the MLB soon, but it probably won't happen. Maybe they'll allow steroids one day and we'll just get like a ton of home runs.
Then get Barry Bonds into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
It's been long enough, if everyone was taking steroids then, get him in the Hall and just, let everyone have fun. Let everyone get a bunch of home runs. But in all seriousness, steroids not good for the game, not good for people's health. Just want to put that back out there.
Yeah. Don't do steroids. Our last headline with baseball: Albert Pujols. He hit his 5th home run in 5 games. He's 5 home runs away from passing A-Rod all time, and I think if he hits either 6 more or 7 more, he could be the 4th player to ever hit 700 home runs for his career. So, Brian, any thoughts on that? Any sign of respect you want to give to an all-time great?
Yeah, I mean, this guy has been around for as long as I could remember. I mean, he has just been, dominant throughout his career. I remember, being able to in 2005, 2006, whatever it was, like playing like MVP baseball with him on like GameCube, and like considering that it's 2022 and this guy is still playing in the league and still has like random spurts where he could just mash home runs. It's just insane to see, and it's gonna be a sad day when he has to retire, probably at the end of the season.
Well, it's good to see him go out with a bang. He deserves it. Again, all-time great baseball player. Transitioning to the NBA, not really much to talk about with it at this point in the season as far as like ongoing news stories, but one development that did go through is LeBron signing a 2-year, $97.1 million contract extension with the Lakers. I didn't see this coming. I didn't think he would sign an extension with them. I didn't think he'd have any talks in signing any kind of contract with them until after the season ended. So that way he could at least kind of feel out like, where's Bronny ranked? Like, what kind of draft pick can I expect him to be worth? Where's our roster going to be? Is Westbrook still here? So, Brian, what are your initial reactions to LeBron signing this 2-year extension with the Lakers after an incredibly disappointing season last year?
Well, first off, I just want to apologize to the viewers about I live right by a hospital, so I get a lot of sirens going on. So that might be an issue during our podcasting. So that might just be a little sound effect that people got to get used to until we can figure out how to fix that. But on the note of LeBron, well, like you said, I expected him to go wherever Bronny goes, and it definitely was a shock to see him, take this extension. And I don't know what it does for the Lakers for their future. I mean, it's similar to Tom Brady, where it's like you just don't know when he's finally going to, go off of that plateau and finally go down. But I mean, he's still been great, and he's just been more injury prone. So I don't know for the Lakers if it's a great deal, but it's a deal that if you're them, you kind of have to make, because you can't just let someone like LeBron leave the building.
Yeah, especially when you mortgaged your entire future to get Anthony Davis and you mortgaged your entire depth to get Russell Westbrook. So I don't know what this says about their future. It seems like they are committing to at least the core of LeBron and Anthony Davis for even longer, which I don't think is a bad thing. I don't know how you feel about this, but I think trading for Westbrook in the first place was a massive overcorrection to just being hurt against the Suns 2 years ago. Like, granted, Kuzma was due for a new contract. He was probably going to go, and Trez was bad. But I don't know. Like, I guess they're looking at it like we can't really get much better without these two guys, without LeBron, without AD. Westbrook, we'll see what happens. But yeah, we're going to talk plenty more Lakers down the road. But very good point. An interesting question that I always ask myself. I'm curious to know what you think. I don't think it's a secret that LeBron wants to play with Bronny. If you were a team that was drafting and you knew that if you picked Bronny, you were going to get a year of LeBron, and like, let's assume that LeBron is at least like 70% of what he was last season. So like an all NBA candidate with obviously like unmatchable veteran leadership, the intangibles he'd bring and the IQ he'd bring, invaluable. How early do you pick Bronny if he wasn't LeBron James Jr., he's like a late first round, early second round talent?
So if he hypothetically is like a late first round talent or like early second, I'd probably pick him like 5 or 10 picks higher than what it normally would be. But it also depends on like my team situation, because if we have, a lot of cap or not, to be able to bring LeBron in for what he's going to want. And, the roles that we have on the team. But if you could get, a little bit of LeBron for 1 or 2 years, and even if you're not great, does so much for your ticket sales. If you have LeBron and Bronny together, it just makes so much sense to do that. But if you find someone who's special that you miss out on, then you're going to really regret that decision. So I don't know.
You really made me think there, because I feel like we get caught up in like ring culture, and it's like if you don't win a championship in a given season, it's like a failure of a season. But yeah, like you said, the truth kind of is it's a business at the end of the day. There's no way LeBron is bad for business. And if you have a decent supporting cast, I don't see why like getting a year or two of LeBron would ever be a bad idea or bad for your team. And yeah, I mean, I don't know about you. I'm not picking Bronny in like the lottery if it means
No,
getting,
no, no.
yeah, especially because if you're a lottery team, it probably means that your team's bad. So it wouldn't make sense. Like I don't think you'd even have the supporting cast to support a LeBron James, especially in a league that is getting way more competitive. So yeah, good talk. Good talk. Do you have any closing thoughts on that before we move to football?
No, I don't think I've got anything else for the current news. As we go on, we'll see what people want, but maybe we'll do reactions to current things going on in the media. Like maybe we'll review like a Hard Knocks episode and say what we liked about it or something like that. We'll see if people want that. But other than that, that's all. That's all for the news.
Oh yeah, that's all for the news. Couple quick points with the NFL. I mean, this isn't even like just news. This is ongoing stuff now. But first of all, the Chargers signing Derwin James to a 4-year, $76.4 million contract extension. The guy's a great player when he's healthy. Injuries have kept him off the field quite a bit, but he's now passed Minkah Fitzpatrick as the highest paid safety in the league. So good for Derwin James. Good for the Chargers. They are definitely going to be a team we talked about. So many big names heading over, at least to the defensive side of the ball over there. But I don't know how you feel about them. In my opinion, very serious Super Bowl threat. But yeah, the big story though is Deshaun Watson. The NFL and the NFLPA finally agree on an 11-game suspension for Deshaun Watson. He will be back against the Texans in Week 12.
It's crazy that it's back against the Texans also, by the way.
Yeah, what are
Like
the odds?
team.
What are the odds, right? So the NFL, obviously not a great track record for dealing with like off the field issues like this. As reflected by the judge, I think her name was Sue Robinson, initially going with the 6-game suspension, not because she thought that Deshaun Watson's assault allegation, well, in her statement, she said that the NFL proved that he did the assaults, not that the assaults were only worth a 6-game suspension, but she was just trying to stay true to the NFL's standards that they had set with their own previous suspensions of players. So 11 games for Deshaun Watson. Very suspect he's coming back against the Texans. That seems like a headline chase to me. But Brian, what are your thoughts on Deshaun Watson getting suspended 11 games?
In my opinion, it's still not nearly enough for what he deserves. But considering Calvin Ridley bet on his own team while he wasn't playing and got suspended for an entire season. But it's one of those things where, you could say that part of it, but also the thing is the rules kind of made it this way, and they need to change the rules and the guidelines so that things like domestic violence, things like, sexual assault get higher game suspensions. Like it should not be that these things are taken so lightly. And, Roger Goodell really needs to step up his game there and change a lot of these guidelines for suspensions, because they have to stop being so lenient on all of this stuff, because it just doesn't make any sense. It's however many was it, 25 women that he assaulted, and you get only 11 games for that. I mean, I was expecting him to possibly not even be in the NFL anymore, considering they did that with Josh Gordon for marijuana usage.
Yeah. It's crazy. And like Deshaun Watson, this isn't You brought up a really good point about Roger Goodell that I want to go back to, but I just want to point out, like, for the people that don't remember the whole saga with Deshaun Watson sitting out because he was trying to force a trade before the sexual assault allegations even came up, like he had a no trade clause, and like he was only looking at teams in nicer locations or closer to home, like the Falcons, because I think he's from Georgia, the Dolphins, because Miami. Uh, and the Browns weren't on his radar, but they offered him more money than all the other suitors, and that's why he took them off, or they added him to his list, and he waived his no trade clause for them. So Deshaun Watson essentially getting a raise for the sexual assault allegations, or as the NFL proved it, to the sexual assaults, which is disgusting. I mean, it's crazy, but Roger Goodell, you're right, he does have to step his game up, and I think that this move is a showcase of he's a weak commissioner. I mean, everyone was getting excited that he fought the 6 games because people really did believe that he would settle for the 6 games. But once he said he was fighting back, the conversation became, will it be a year? That's what was coming out of the NFL's camp, like a year-long suspension. And I don't know why it cut to 11. I really don't understand it. I don't know who
It's
he was
also
fighting.
right, and it's also like a weird number, like for it to be 11 and then to come back against the Texans. I don't know. It just seems a little weird. That's all I could say. That's all I could say. Another thing too that I didn't talk about was the Browns. How, you know, put aside that they, signed Kareem Hunt and then signed Deshaun Watson. You could argue, oh, we want to give people second chances, prove that they could change themselves, change their narrative. One thing, okay, you could argue that if you feel that's the case. But they decided we're going to give Deshaun Watson all his money through signing bonuses, so that can't be taken away through suspensions or anything of that sort. So he's really not he's barely losing any money for all of this. I mean, maybe that's changed with the 11 games as opposed to 6, but I'm pretty sure a lot of that is guaranteed money that just can't be taken away. And for the Browns to just be completely okay with that, and because if you make a contract like that they only get whatever it is, like $1 million through their non-guarantee that could be suspended, and then get a guaranteed like 200 million or whatever the number is. You're playing into the part, and you're helping a guy out who's like, how is he going to learn more from this?
Yeah, and Deshaun Watson has maintained his innocence unsurprisingly, and doesn't seem to be very remorseful at all based on kind of his impromptu PR moves. It's shameful. And I don't know, like it's interesting because I feel like as a sports fan, you can agree with this or disagree with this, but in my opinion, I feel like the teams that, if you're a neutral fan, you tend to root for are the ones that are just always bad. And with the Browns, we kind of saw like an ascension from trashdom. You know what I mean? You're going off of like a combined 1 game that you won in 2 seasons to, okay, like Baker, he did a fine enough job as a quarterback. Now we're a perennial wild card contender, 8 to 9 wins. You can expect that with this crew. So you kind of expect the Browns to be like the underdog that everyone's rooting for, but I feel like since that trade, they are the only team that everyone hates. At least that's how I've kind of seen people discuss them online. What do you think of that? Kind of them. Is it strange to see them kind of leave the not that this is like important given like the gravity of what Deshaun Watson's done, but is it strange to see them go from like the ascending underdog to just everyone hates them?
Oh, it is really strange. I mean, I, for one, was rooting for the Browns, a year ago, 2 years ago. I still remember when they had those like Bud Lights like locked up for when they won their first game after it was like however many games in a row that they lost, and I was like so excited once they finally got one. And because I'm a fan of a bad football team. The Jets have only been good 2 years of my life. Other than that, so it's like, when you see one of the guys on the bottom get a few wins, you get happy. But now that what they've done with Deshaun Watson, I can't root for them at all anymore.
Yeah, I hope the worst for Deshaun Watson and the Browns. I hope they don't win anything ever. which is petty. And I know it's like meaningless to even be saying things like that, but I mean, it's just, it's hard to watch a move like that go through. It really is.
Another thing
And
too is, are you surprised that they decided to trade Baker before knowing any of the suspensions or anything of that sort?
I mean, honestly, I don't think I am, because based on the way that they kind of, or are you saying like for Deshaun Watson or just in general?
No, like because they still had Baker on the roster when once they signed Deshaun, and they knew that Deshaun was going to possibly get suspended. So if especially if it was only 6 games, which would have been better for them, they could have had Baker play those 6 games and then show his value and then trade him for possibly even more. I
Mm-hmm.
thought it was a bad decision by them in terms of, now they have Jacoby Brissett playing, who's still a manager, is a good backup to have, but you could have had Baker for 6 games and been, still a contender for, well, now 11 games. And then, your season's kind of down the chutes.
So with that, I'm actually not surprised at all, because it's true. It would make more sense to hold on to Baker. He'd be a phenomenal backup quarterback, and he really should be starting. I think he's coming off a bad year because he was really forced to play through an injury, because, obviously he had a contract coming up. But, when the Browns emerged in those Deshaun Watson rumors, they were putting out hit pieces on Baker to justify trading for Deshaun preemptively before they did it. And it was clear through some reports that the relationship between Baker and the team was gone. Baker had made it clear he wasn't going to play another snap for them. So I think with the Browns, it was just kind of like, well, we may as well get rid of as much of your contract as we can for this year and try and build around whatever team the NFL lets us have. Because, the news about the suspension took so long to like really crystallize into something. But yeah, I mean, on paper, it would make a ton of sense to keep Baker. But ironically, they were putting out reports about his faulty character issues and how he's immature and a bad leader for the locker room. So I hope Baker has success in Carolina. He's not someone I rooted for because he was in Cleveland there in the Steelers division. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's true. I completely forgot about Baker saying that he wouldn't, rightfully so, play a snap for the Browns again, because yeah, they really weren't good to him, his entire time there, which is bizarre considering they drafted him 1 overall. And normally you would treat that guy like your prized possession. And until Darnold left, like the Jets treated him like a prized possession, even though like he had rough years there and had crazy headlines that made the Jets look bad, and they still treated him like gold. And it's just, more and more things about the Browns organization that don't really look good and don't make you want to root for them.
no, you trade for a guy who has almost 30 counts, 30 accusations of sexual assault, and then you want to flame your previous quarterback for character issues.
Right.
It's so classless. So yeah, I mean, we could rag on the Browns forever, and we really could do it forever. But yeah, no, that's a good point. It is a good point. Like they put themselves in this position where they couldn't even hold Baker. I can't even imagine like being him in that situation, knowing that they're kicking you out in the way that they are for who they're doing it for. I don't know. The NFL is, and they certainly are not the best when it comes to off the field issues. They've shown that over and over and over. But yeah, is there anything left to even say on this? I'm sure we'll have more to say as more developments kind of pop up.
Yeah, I don't think so. I guess the only other thing before we go into the next thing we're gonna do is the over unders.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. The only thing before that is, actually we can talk about it with the over unders. I was gonna just mention the Zach Wilson injury and things of that sort. But once we go into the Jets over under numbers, I'll go more into it then.
Definitely. Okay, so we'll transition to that. I think we have about 20 minutes left, right? 20 minutes,
Yeah, I'd
30
say
minutes.
so.
Okay. Whew, man, it is good to be back on with,
It
like, for real.
really
It
is.
is it is so good to be back on with you. All right, so me and Brian, I pulled up well, this was Brian's idea, but we both kind of thought the same way. Brian mentioned the over unders. We went straight to Vegas. I got some numbers here. We haven't considered the schedule in depth, but we're going to be going through the teams in the NFL that we have the time to discuss here, and off of kind of a gut reaction to their offseason. We will say if we like their over under, are we taking the over or taking the under? Is there anything I'm missing with the explanation of this exercise over here?
Nope. I think you've handled it perfectly.
My man, my man. All right. So in the interest of going to Zach Wilson, let's start with the Jets. Last season, they won 4 games. I would say, like in the essence of like rooting for underdogs, I think everybody who observed the draft walked out thinking they had one of the best 3 drafts of anybody. And their over-unders at 5.5. So given the team's improvements, if you think they're improvements, and given obviously injuries to Zach Wilson, Mekhi Becton, where do you see them fall? Like, do you like the over? Do you like the under? How many wins you think they're going to get? What's happening?
I want to hear your outside perspective first before I give mine, and drop a little more knowledge on what I know and what my biases are. So I want to hear your unbiased opinion first.
So the Jets are so weird to evaluate because it honestly comes down to one thing, and that's if you believe in Zach Wilson as a quarterback. The dude has all the physical attributes to be a great quarterback. I know like Josh Allen was a common comp to him when he was like in the draft, but that's not on a skill. That's purely because of his physical profile. He had a horrific start to the season last year. But he picked it up kind of in the last third, which is what you want to see from rookie quarterbacks. But you also should pick it up from where you started. I mean, he started below ground zero. So I like the draft from the standpoint of they got the guys that they wanted. Like, I think from a draft philosophy perspective, it's like, okay, if Jermaine Johnson went 23 and you were actually looking at him at like the top 5, it's good that you got him. I'm sure the Jets talent personnel are better at evaluating these guys than I am. So off of the fact that they stayed true to what they wanted, yeah, I like it. I think that they had a decent draft. Their offensive line really isn't that bad, but Mekhi Becton is a huge blow. Not that he's been on the field all that much, which I do think will hurt Zach Wilson. I do think it will hurt Breece Hall a lot. I think it'll affect their running game because Breece Hall he reminds me of Le'Veon Bell in the way that his running style is very shifty, and it kind of depends on like looking at the holes that the offensive line will leave you. The defense, I don't know if there were too many like sizable improvements.
Other than like they got Sauce Gardner like in the draft, and then DJ Reed from the Seahawks,
right?
Jordan Whitehead from the Bucks. Other than like they improved their secondary a lot, but outside of that, they've got a healthy Carl Lawson now. But other than that, the defense is probably going to be the weaker part.
Yeah, like the solid players. I don't know if it's like ground shakingly changing for them. I think I would take the over, and I'd put them at about like 6 wins, assuming some Zach Wilson improvement post coming back from the injury. When is he supposed to come back? Is he going to be ready for week 1?
So it's looking like they said, I think 4 to 6 weeks, and it happened, I think 4 weeks before the season. They want him to be 100% before he comes back. Mm-hmm. And week 1 is against the Ravens. So I don't think they're going to want to put him back up there right away against the Ravens. Mm-hmm. I feel like he'll come back week 2, week 3. But considering week 1's against the Ravens, we probably weren't going to win that one anyways. And it'll be Joe Flacco against the Ravens. Maybe we get a little Joe Flacco revenge game, but highly unlikely. But yeah, that's when he'll be back.
I like that. For back to that season ticket selling point. Yeah, I like that. That Joe Flacco versus the Ravens, that's fun. But all right, the floor is yours, Mr. Jets fan. Right. What do you think?
And I really, if they don't hit this over, I think it'll be a pretty much a failure of a season. I mean, we can't have another 5-win season. It's just really bad to have that year after year after year, considering how much talent we've added through the draft. I mean, from this year and last year, like Elijah Moore should take a huge step this year. He was a great pick last year. Jermaine Johnson will be good. I think Breece Hall could win Offensive Rookie of the Year. He is a talented player. And, I've been to, oh God, here comes more motorcycles. I've just got all the noises going on. So yeah, Brees Hall, he's a very talented player. I've seen some things beforehand of only, 5 or so players have gotten 99 overall ratings from the combine. And it was Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, Travis Etienne, and I forget who the other two were, but they were two very good running backs as well. And he was like the sixth one to get that kind of rating. Granted, doesn't say anything. And knowing the Jets, how many times the Jets get people that have had talent and they just underperform. But he could catch the ball, he could run with the ball, and he could be that, dynamite that our offense needs, that home run hitter that we haven't had since like Curtis Martin. From that perspective, he'll help out Zach Wilson a ton. Having a good run game always helps out the QB. Wide receivers are better than they've ever been. Getting Garrett Wilson in the draft, Elijah Moore and Corey Davis, and then having Braxton Berrios just on the side extra. I mean, that's the most depth we've had at wide receiver as I could ever remember. Defensive line is a lot better. We have John Franklin Myers. We've got Quinnen Williams on a contract year. Hopefully he'll be a little better too. Carl Lawson, who will be healthy this year. I think we've got a lot more depth this year than we've ever had for the past like 5 or so years. So considering that we have that, if we have anything less than 6 wins, it'll be a failure for me.
How many wins do you think you're getting?
It's like you said, it's going to be all about Zach Wilson. And in camp, he was pretty solid. His first preseason game, his first drive, it's one drive, but his drive was pretty bad. And it showed all of the stuff that he did poorly last season, all in one drive within like 3 passes. It was everything wrong that he did. Overthrowing on a simple like out route that was, 2 yards away, throwing, and missing a linebacker for an interception, seeing a linebacker who just gets an easy interception, things he did early on last year. So, you could do great in training camp, but if you can't do it on the field with the spotlight on you, it means nothing. I want to see him run more this year, but now that he got this injury, I don't want to see him run as much anymore now. And unless he could slide or run out of bounds, which, maybe he'll learn from this to do, but he didn't really learn, I guess, from last year when he hurt his PCL. But if he, cuts down the interceptions, and he doesn't even have to do that much, just be a game manager and we can win 6 games. If he tries to play hero ball, we'll win 4 games. And if he throws 3 interceptions a game, we might not even win 4 games. So it's really going to all come down to him. And if he starts making smart plays, and if he makes smart plays and electric plays, then, our ceiling is a lot higher. But I can't see him taking a huge jump. I think he'll make like improvements, but I don't think he's going to be like a MVP or like a top 10 quarterback at the end of this year.
So we're talking a lot about potential versus output. Exactly. There's a reason Zach Wilson was drafted where he was, like so high in the draft. But as someone who has paid probably more attention than most to his development, his performance week by week, like what are your honest opinions on Zach Wilson? Do you think he's a long-term solution for the Jets at quarterback, or do you think it'll be time to move on from him sooner rather than later?
I think he can be that special player. It's just he needs to be consistent is the thing. Once he came back from his PCL injury in his first year, he showed a lot of improvement. And the game against the Bucs, the one where Antonio Brown went pieced out to the sideline, he was having a great game that game, and he was really showing who he could be. And he can make those special plays like he did against the Titans on those those off schedule plays, where he threw one to Corey Davis for like a 60-yard touchdown, where he just ran out to the side and looked like Mahomes really on those couple of plays against the Titans. And he single-handedly won them the game against the Titans. But even in that game, he made, silly plays that he could have won it sooner instead of going to overtime. If you watch that game and remember that one. So it's just all about him being consistent. He's shown that he can make those amazing plays, but if he's not consistent, it doesn't mean anything.
So we got to see that consistency, which is a common issue for quarterbacks at his point in his career.
Absolutely.
So are you discouraged? Or are you cautious?
I'm cautious. I was all on the Darnold train when he was on the team and was a full believer, and I've been hurt before. So I'm not putting myself fully out there to get hurt again.
Brian with the coping mechanisms and such. All right, well, before we move on, if you had to commit, so committing to the answer, over under, which are you
So
taking with respect? Yeah, go.
I would say over. I have them at 7 wins this year.
7 wins. Okay. And how would you feel as a fan if they won 7?
I'd feel optimistic for the future. I think we're a year away from playoffs because we're starting to get that depth and got young players getting better. And 7 wins, I think, would get us in a good spot for the next year.
I'll take it. If I was a Jets fan, I'd take it too. Let's move next door to the Giants. In the interest of kind of keeping it local to New York sports, the Giants last season winning 4 games. Obviously, their offense was completely decimated by injuries, and their defense just underperformed. A lot of disappointing seasons from several players, most notably Bradbury, going from an elite corner to kind of just a guy on the field for most of the season. Their over-unders at 7.5 after a 4-win season. So where are you with the Giants? Are you taking that over or are you taking the under?
I mean, obviously I'm a little biased, but I just don't get what they did in their offseason that gave them another 3.5 wins, to their schedule. Maybe it's because they have a NFC East that's, not too difficult. So in that sense, they could potentially, steal a few wins that way. But, what did they do other than they had a solid draft? I'll give them that, getting Evan Neal and well, they got the
Kayvon Thibodeau.
Yeah, Thibodeau. That was a really good draft for them as well. So those are big pieces, but I just don't see 2 rookies alone bumping you up 3 games, especially when Daniel Jones hasn't looked good at all in the preseason. And preseason isn't everything. You don't know how that translates to the regular season, but I don't think Daniel Jones is the answer, and ultimately it comes down to him.
Yeah, that's definitely a big part of it. I agree with a lot of that. I will say I'll kind of gauge how you feel on this. I think the biggest argument to be made in favor of the Giants is the retooling of their coaching staff.
That's
Judge
true.
is gone. Why is his name? Jason Garrett no longer calling plays. Oh my God. You've got everybody coming over from the Bills, starting with Dable.
Dable's going to be a great coach. So that is very true.
At the top, you've got the Bills assistant GM. His name is evading my memory, but he's calling the shots now. So you can assume overall better roster construction, more interesting direction. You've got Saquon coming back after his freak ankle roll. But even with all that, like Daniel Jones isn't Josh Allen, so we're not going to put that ceiling on him or this offense. It really is going to come down to what Daniel Jones does with more around him. Even if Saquon is able to carry the offense, I don't think that's necessarily going to carry them to 8 wins. So you're taking the under.
Yeah, and I don't think it will be too far from what the number is, considering that, like I said, the NFC East is just pretty open, up for grabs, and they do have some talent. Galladay is a talented player. He hasn't really been showing it lately, but I feel like once the season starts, I mean, he's going to get at least a few touchdowns. Like, he's going to have some production. I can't see him just vanishing. I think I'll have them at like 6 wins just because the NFC East, there's just too many options to get wins where, I can't see them losing 2 to the Commanders. I can't see them losing 2, maybe both to the Cowboys, but they could probably split with the Eagles. I just can't see them losing every single game in their division.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I definitely don't think they're one of the better teams in their division. I think the spoiler alert to when we go deeper into this later on, but I think the Eagles are one of the best teams or most improved teams in the NFC. I don't like the Cowboys as much. I still think they're better than the Giants. I would probably take the under. I think an over of 8 is definitely possible, but I don't know if their ceiling is much higher than that.
Right. And it's all going to depend. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
Okay. And just, with every team, realistically, it's all going to depend on the quarterback and what they can do. Because if Daniel Jones, takes a fourth year, is it fourth year or third year for him?
Might be fifth. Let me
Oh,
check. Let's see.
but
He was
yeah. So
drafted
for him,
mhm. Drafted 2019. So this is year 4.
2019, year 4. Yeah, so this is a big year for him. So I mean, if he could put up, then he can he could definitely bring this team to 8 wins if he does show up and fights for his contract year, saying I want to still be a starting quarterback in this league. If he has that power in him, then this team could definitely win 8 games. Just a matter of what he could do.
Yeah, and despite last year's absolutely abysmal offensive performance where Mike Glennon was starting a few games, you've got Saquon, you've got Galladay, Kadarius Toney, even though he didn't play much last year, his
He's really
numbers
good.
were elite as far as like yards per route run, all those things. Wan'Dale Robinson is looking like kind of a sleeper pick from this draft. The dude has had a great camp. Obviously, just like the Jets, people were kind of looking at them like the Giants had one of the better drafts coming out. So I don't know. Daniel Jones has everything he needs. He's also shown some really glaring flaws in his game, some really concerning red flags. So again, just like the Jets with Zach Wilson, I think where you project the Giants is ultimately going to come down to what you think Daniel Jones can do with more around him. I think we got about like 5 minutes left. Do you want to wrap up? Do you think we could do another one quick? I don't
Yeah,
know if
I
I
think we
want
could
to do.
do. Oh, you
We
don't
could
want
do
to do the
another.
Steelers yet?
We might need a little more time for them
Okay,
because that one might be a bit more emotional.
right.
But
And these over unders we could keep on doing throughout the next couple of weeks before the season starts. So we do have some time with that.
yeah, absolutely. So what's a team that you think is worth bringing up? A team that caught your eye this offseason?
A team that caught my eye. I'd like to save. I was gonna say the Lions because they're on Hard Knocks, but I'd like to save that for the end of that, so that we can kind of see more of those episodes and kind of talk about that whole series. We could talk about the Chargers, considering we talked about the Derwin James signing before. That's a good team to talk about.
Oh yeah. So the Chargers last season winning 9 games somehow with obviously their season ending in the most like shocking way, but their over unders at 10.5. As far as the narrative, they have a great offensive line. Obviously, one of the most dynamic young quarterbacks in the game. The closest thing we've probably had to Brett Favre since Favre. Um, Good weapons, good running game. Nice addition of Isaiah Spiller in the draft. Loaded defense with just all these new names they brought in. JC Jackson was one of the elite corners last year for the Patriots. They traded for Khalil Mack, obviously re-signing Derwin James. They got Mr. Bosa. I mean, what is there not to like about this team? If I'm betting, I think I might take the under and go for 10 simply because they play in the AFC West and it's going to be a bloodbath. I think all 4 of those teams could make playoffs. I think it's very possible that they will. So it might be one of those situations where their actual talent and actual like value as a team is higher than what the win losses reflect. But that's kind of my stance. I'm curious to know what you think. What do you think of their additions? What's their outlook in your eyes?
I also think they're going to be a great team this year, but like you said, this AFC West is, I mean, all of these teams got so much better. I mean, maybe the Chiefs didn't get better, but like the Chiefs, how can they get better when they're already ridiculously good? It'll be interesting to see how Mahomes is without Tyreek Hill, but I'm sure he'll be fine because he's Mahomes. But anyways, we're talking about the Chargers. Um, this is so tough. This is Vegas has the number like exactly. I mean, when is Vegas far off with anything? I think I'll have to pick the over here. I don't think that the Broncos are as legit as people are making them out to be. Their defense is elite. Don't get me wrong. I think Wilson is a little past his prime, and that's just my opinion on that. I think the Raiders are solid, but they're not anything that's going to blow you away. I think the Chargers are legit. They've got a lot of talent, and I think they could easily win 11 games.
Do you think they win the division?
it's one of those things where it's like, how can you win 11 games and not win the division? But when you're in the same division as the Chiefs, how are you going to win the division? I still think it's the Chiefs division to lose.
Philosophically, because I think a point of contention with the Chargers last year was their ultra aggressive play calling, constantly going for it on fourth down. Given how that backfired for them in the last week of the season last year, do you think that they continue to go for it on fourth down as much? Or do you think they continue to do it because they don't want to overcorrect? I mean, even though they only won 9 games, they still had a pretty successful season last year that included a big jump from Herbert. So what do you think is going to happen on that front?
Yeah, that was an emotional loss where it could have, easily been avoided if, it was just a crazy game. If I'm them, it's the same thing as the Rays for baseball, how if you stick to your system, it usually works out. And I feel like if you have a system in place and if you truly believed in it, one hard loss shouldn't change your system. However, there were no coaching staff changes or anything of that sort, right? Or
Not
like any like
significantly, I
big
don't think.
changes. Yeah, like nothing like up like GM wise or anything like that. And if that's the case, you have to stick to what got you, to get to the 9-win point, and hope that Herbert gets better, which he should. He already made a huge jump from year 1 to year 2, and if he continues to do that even more, this is a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, I agree. Do what works. Do you? I think the best sports team, and I know we had a show about this all those years ago, but we talked a lot about how like identity is
Yes,
a
I was
big
thinking about
indicator of
that the other day.
success. Yeah, identity is huge. This is what the Chargers do, and there really isn't much you could do about it. I think that when you've got a guy like Herbert, when you've got old reliable Keenan Allen, someone as explosive and dynamic as Mike Williams, you got Eckler and Spiller in the backfield. I don't think even Parham, I know he just got hurt, but even at that spot as for your receiving core, that's another really dynamic athlete. Man, 4 downs of that, I wouldn't want to deal with it if I was a defense, and they know that. So I think kind of keeping their foot on gas is what they're going to continue to do until the coach is fired, frankly, or unless there are some conversations between the coaching and the front office that we don't know about. But I mean, it worked. It was exciting last year. It was fun last year. I think it's good for the game. I kind of hope more teams go for it. But we'll see.
Yeah, I mean,
We'll
you
see.
don't want to see your team punt on the 50, or
Yeah.
do what the Giants did last year with that QB sneak on third down
Oh yeah.
on their own like 5-yard line. I can't make fun of them too much because the Jets were god awful too, but man, less of that in the NFL will make the season a lot more fun. Granted, it's always fun during the football season.
Oh yeah. Me and Brian are hyped. We are hyped. Yeah, I feel like that's a good probably a good ending spot, right?
Yeah, I think so.
All
I
right.
think
So
this was a great first show. Let us know what you want to see from us in the future. Let us know what teams you want us to do next week for over-unders. And, any feedback that you give us will be appreciated so that we can, make the show better for everyone who's listening.
yep, absolutely. We will get to you with the mailbag, with the Twitter. We're gonna come ready. This is Ben and Brian, Heads Up Podcast. Keep your head up, keep your eyes open, and we will see you next time.